Welcome to Glass Half Full with Leslie Krongold. She shares her stories, experiences, and knowledge of living and coping with a chronic health condition. Learn about tools and resources and hear inspirational interviews that help you to live a life filled with quality and dignity. With 2 decades of support group leadership, Leslie's ready to help you make lemonade out of life's lemons. Are you ready?
Every year, there are a few diagnostic tests I need because of my myotonic dystrophy. Some of these tests are to monitor my heart because many of us with myotonic dystrophy have electrical conduction issues and eventually require a pacemaker. A couple of weeks ago, I was at my local Kaiser Permanente hospital getting an echocardiogram. If you're unfamiliar with this test, it's not painful, it's just a bit awkward. You lay or lie half naked on your side. The technician rubs something like Vaseline on your upper body and presses deeply with a probe while looking at a screen displaying your beating heart. My session lasted for about 30 minutes. Mary Lou, my echocardiogram technician, commented that I had a beautiful heart. This was a surprise. I didn't interpret it as a flirtation, but a great conversation starter. I asked her what other hearts look like. What made mine so beautiful? She told me about dirty-looking hearts from years of smoking. She sees a lot of hearts and assured me that there are many differences. I envisioned her writing poetry based on the beating heart she looks at for hours and hours each week. Later that day, as I swelled with the news about my beautiful heart, I realized Valentine's Day was approaching, and that's how this episode came about. I suspect the health of our hearts is due to many factors. Some genetics, some lifestyle choices, and some environmental factors we have little control over. According to the American Heart Association, ideal cardiovascular health is a combination of 4 healthy behaviors and 3 health measurements. The behaviors are not smoking, maintaining a healthy weight, exercising regularly, and eating a healthy diet. The measurements include total cholesterol under 200 milligrams per deciliter, blood pressure under 120/80, and fasting blood sugar under 100. Not adhering to those guidelines can result in all sorts of problems, including heart failure, stroke, diabetes, and the list goes on. In fact, in a recent issue of the University of California Berkeley Wellness Letter, there's an article about the relationship between heart health and brain health. Many studies have found that cardiovascular risk factors in middle age are associated with the likelihood of developing dementia later in life. Back to the behaviors. I don't have anything to say about smoking or healthy weight, but diet and exercise are something I can speak to. You could probably find many dietary plans focused on heart health on the internet. In perusing some of the newsletters I read, I found something about nuts. This is based on a Swedish study that found people who snack on nuts 3 or more times each week had a lower risk of atrial fibrillation. So, add nuts to your diet. In an Australian study with nearly 1,000 older women, those that ate 3 or more servings of vegetables each day fared better than those who ate 2 or fewer servings each day. The study also found cruciferous vegetables, that would be like broccoli, cauliflower, those were the most beneficial. One of my favorite newsletters is Dr. Andrew Weil's Self-Healing. A few years ago, in an article titled Rethinking Dietary Fats and Heart Health, he gave a thumbs up to butter and a thumbs down to red meat and processed meats in terms of their impact on cardiovascular health. In the Tufts University Health and Nutrition letter, I read about a study with middle-aged men. Those who ate higher amounts of protein were at a higher risk of heart failure than those who ate less protein. And I think we're really talking about animal protein. So maybe, just maybe, my heart is beautiful because I gave up meat over 30 years ago. Enough about diet. Let's turn to physical activity. Physical therapy professor Erica Pitsch at the UCSF School of Medicine had this to say during a recent interview.
I've seen a lot of people that, with multiple diagnoses that have a good exercise ethic, and they tend to fare better. And there was actually a study a number of years ago called the Framingham Heart Study, which followed people for decades. And people who exercise have a less probability of dying of anything.
And was
Just
it
like in general?
Thousands of people in the study?
Yeah. Oh, no, in the U.S.
Oh, okay, yeah. Great.
I think it was called the Framingham. Oh, now I got to Google it now. The Framingham Heart Study. But yeah, no, exercise improves overall survival in general.
You can find a link to the Framingham study on the Glass Half Full website, as well as links to 2 previous podcast episodes with Professor Pitsch. One is about stroke survival, and the other episode is all about balance and falling. I admit it's difficult to glean the best dietary advice from research, since one month there's a study that finds eating eggs to be nutritious, and the next month there's another study advising against eating eggs. But with physical exercise, it seems fairly conclusive that movement is key, whether it's walking, working out at a gym, or just remaining active in your home doing chores. Wow! In 2017, there was the PURE study, and PURE, P-U-R-E, is an acronym for Prospective Urban-Rural Epidemiology Study. It was written about by the American College of Cardiology, and the article I read found that just 150 minutes of physical activity each week reduces cardiovascular disease and deaths. So, ultimately you're still going to die, but during the study's time, there was an evidence of prolonged life when compared with a group of people not exercising for at least 150 minutes per week. Okay, so that's 22 minutes of exercise each day. I can do that. Are you up for that challenge? Let that be your Valentine's Day gift to yourself and your loved ones. As I mentioned, we don't have complete control over all the factors that may result in heart complications. My beautiful heart may have benefited from my father's genetics because I know my mom's genetics passed on the myotonic dystrophy gene. For this episode, I wanted to include a few people I know with heart conditions. The first is John, a retired attorney in Oakland, who was diagnosed with congestive heart failure in 2017. I met John on a patient advisory council at Kaiser Permanente.
For the previous year, I had been declining in terms of my ability to breathe and my ability to walk any distance at all. I used to be a backpacker, and I could walk, 5 or 6 miles a day with 50 pounds on my back at altitude. And that was great. It was one of my favorite things to do. And gradually I began having less and less ability to walk until it got to the point where I really couldn't walk more than maybe 100 yards or something without having to stop for breath. So one night I was in bed laying on my back, and I felt that I couldn't breathe. I mean, I could breathe, but I didn't have enough air. So my wife suggested I go in, which I should have done a long time ago, but it just never occurred to me that I had a heart thing because I've always been healthy. And right away they figured it out that I had what's called congestive heart failure, which means that the heart is not pumping efficiently. So what that meant and why I felt an air hunger was that I had a lot of fluid in my lungs. The heart wasn't pushing the fluid throughout the body, and my lungs were filled with fluid, and that's why I couldn't get enough air to feel like I could properly breathe. A lot of heart people with congestive heart failure, they have to sleep at a recline or even sitting up for that reason. So it's a life-threatening thing. It's not uncommon, and they have a whole great big protocol at Kaiser to deal with it, and they have done that, and I've been treated quite well. And they put in a device which regulates my ventricles, the lower chambers of the heart, to get them to be synchronous, which is one of my problems, because they were beating at different times. And then if I'm at a higher risk to go down with a heart attack, so it has a defibrillator built into the device that I carry around in my chest with wires that go down into the heart to pick up the electrical information from the heart and put it into the computer, and then it does its job.
At one of our advisory council meetings, where we both volunteer at Kaiser, John mentioned a group he attends, Mended Hearts. So I asked him about it.
You can go on their website. It's a national organization, and it was started in Oakland by a cardiologist at Sutter Hospital. And I haven't learned all of the things that they do, but the things that I have learned are they have a meeting once a month. They bring in a speaker of some sort or some sort of a presentation. Sometimes it has to do with hearts, and sometimes it has to do with something else. Like the last one was about, life enhancement. One of these life coach people, and so she put on her talk. That's one piece of it. The other piece, obviously, is that it's a sort of an affinity group where people who have some kind of a heart issue go to meet other people who have some kind of a heart issue. So that was actually the reason that I was interested in it, was some peer contacts with people. The third thing that they do is they have a visitation program. So you're trained as a visitor. You have to learn different things that they want you to know about, like, HIPAA rules and the things that you do and don't say to a patient, and you don't comment on their treatment or whether that's good or bad, various things like that. And so what happens is you sign up and you go like 4 hours a week, and you just show up. The nurses on the floor have already asked different people, well, there's somebody from Mended Hearts coming. Would you like to talk to him or her? And they say yes or no. So once that's happened, then you show up, and the nurse says, the lady in room 13 wants to talk to you. And that's what you do, is you go in there and just talk. Mm-hmm. So it's obviously a support kind of a thing, but the idea behind it is that if you're a person who has some heart condition and you're in the hospital, you're an inpatient, it's really helpful to have somebody who has also had some kind of a heart condition come and talk to you, a peer, not one of the medical people. I think that's the biggest thing, is the visitation.
Mm-hmm. I asked John how this experience has changed his life and what he now does to remain healthy.
They did a bunch of expensive things for me. They did a catheterization where they run a camera on the end of a wire up into your heart and somehow manipulate it around the different arteries to see whether there's any kind of a blockage. There was none. I didn't have any disease in my arteries. So that was good, because it wasn't like, okay, well, if you start eating this strictly vegan diet and leave out all of these different things, which I really, really, really didn't want to do, then you can, maybe turn this around. And I wasn't in that category.
Mm-hmm.
They have a heart health nurse at Kaiser, and she goes over all of the things that you should be doing and gives you a pretty extensive booklet about it, like no salt and avoid this and that. Alcohol is one of the big ones. Mm-hmm. No smoking, that sort of thing. So I now take about 6-7 pills every day that are for my heart to help it work better. Not get better, but work better. And then when they put that device in my chest, they told me that, in around 6 months, you're going to start feeling a lot better. And that is true. I'm able to go to yoga twice a week for an hour and a half. And today's my yoga day. And then I've started recently a personal training program at the Y. In an ideal case, I'll be able to go to the Y 3 days a week. Mm-hmm. And then I can use the swimming pool there and swim. So I can have a lot of activity. And I do have a lot of activity. That's what I'm doing right now. And, I just feel better. I have more spring in my step. People look at me and say there's more color in my face. My wife says, well, you're standing up straighter and you don't have a furrowed brow all the time. And so, yeah, you look a lot better, And that's true. I feel a whole lot better. I don't feel normal in terms of, how I felt 10 years ago, but I do feel, but for the fact that I tire easily, I would feel pretty normal. I don't have any other issues during the day.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks to modern medicine, huh?
You bet. Yeah, you bet.
And modern medicine has really come a long way. I remember when I was growing up in the 70s, hearing about so many men who died from heart attacks. My own father had a heart attack close to 20 years ago. He's still thriving with the help of stents and drugs. I also had uncles on my mother's side of the family who died from sudden heart failure, which was the common way people with myotonic dystrophy died. Which brings me back to the echocardiogram, EKG, and Holter monitor I wear every year to see how my heart is doing. In an earlier podcast episode all about adventure, Rob, who has myotonic dystrophy, and his share of heart issues, celebrated his recovery from cardiac surgery by climbing Mount Everest. Now, his story, I admit, is a bit extreme, but there are others in my patient community that are also thriving in spite of cardiac issues. Saurabh, who lives in San Francisco and works in the financial industry, has a pacemaker. He practices yoga and meditation to mitigate stress, which exacerbates his heart condition, and he also sees an Ayurvedic practitioner as well as Western doctors. His treatment also includes an Ayurvedic supplement called Arjuna, which is from the bark of the Arjuna tree. By the way, ironically, Saurabh only lives a few miles from me, but the phone connection had interference. I tried to reduce some of the noise.
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with myotonic dystrophy in 2009. They pretty much had told me when I got diagnosed that most people who get this diagnosis tend to have heart issues, and upon a subsequent follow-up with a cardiologist, I had electrical conduction problems, and they said they would need to follow up with me every 6 months. I was diagnosed with a problem called atrial flutter initially, which is irregular heartbeat, and so I had to go and get a surgery done which corrected that. But that led to another form of irregular heartbeat, which is pretty common for people 60 years and older, but I was 30 at that age, and it's called atrial fibrillation. With atrial fibrillation, I had to go on medication because people with atrial fibrillation tend to be at a high risk for stroke, and I was on follow-up every 6 months. Along with the heartbeat, at some point in time, I started getting short, dizzy spells, and my cardiologist suggested getting a Holter monitor done for about 2 weeks, and those 2 weeks the device that they put on me, if I had a dizzy spell, I was just supposed to press a button, and when the results came out and I pressed the button when I was getting those dizzy spells, they figured out that my heart was missing beats at that point in time, and because of the missing beats, they decided to go in and put a pacemaker. I don't do a lot specifically for my heart health, but I do things which try and lead a healthier life overall. This would also help my heart. I exercise, I do yoga, and I also try and get some cardio exercising. And I do. The problem is the conduction problem, so I definitely take that into account and not take my heart rate up too high. When I exercise, I also meditate to keep stress away, because I realized my irregular beats were definitely perked up a lot around stressful situations. So I meditate, and that helps me manage my stress. I did speak to an Ayurvedic practitioner. She suggested a medicine called Arjuna, which is supposed to protect your heart health in general. Use it as a substitute for anything in normal food. It's easier to have it as a capsule.
There's so much more to explore about the heart. For example, I wanted to include the role love and intimacy may play with heart health, but I just didn't have the time. But I invite you to listen to an earlier podcast episode for Valentine's Day with Dr. Danielle Sheypuk. The link is on the Glass Half Full website, and Dr. Sheypuk, who holds the title of Sexpert for the disabled community, introduces the topic of dateable self-esteem. The episode is called Sassy in a Wheelchair. And now, my Valentine's Day gift to you.
Thank you for listening to Glass Half Full. Leslie invites you to leave a rating and review on iTunes. This helps spread the word to others dealing with chronic health issues. For show notes, updates, and more, visit the website glasshalffull.online. Glasshalffull.online.